Ready.
We're on mute and
I just,
Hello, friends online and in the room. Welcome. I am Chelsea Odner. Thanks. And it is, thank you. Well, I know it's Friday. I don't know. August 7th. Thank you. We are at the Freiburg New Church Assembly, our last day of lectures, I believe. Oh, there is one more tomorrow? Okay, good. Okay, great. You got more to look forward to. And yeah, thank you all for having me here. And I spoke on Tuesday, so I'm excited today to pick up the topic of this combination of when you look at what Swedenborg wrote about our psyches through this lens of internal family systems, this modern psychotherapeutic approach, to me it kind of like makes things pop off the page in a way that they did before, but like lots of fun interconnections happening in my mind. And so last time I introduced this picture, which has inflow from the sun of the spiritual world, from the divine love and wisdom itself that flows in. And as Swedenborg says, the Lord flows in with all his divine love and all his divine wisdom into all of us, and we take as much of that in as we want. You know, we control the intake. And, but really, as much as it might seem otherwise, the more love and wisdom you have, the better things feel. The quality of life, your quality of life greatly improves. But still, we have, you could say, some stumbling blocks, or we run into some resistance to opening to that inflow that is happening mostly down here in the outer self. And so the whole path of regeneration, Swedenborg says, is connecting your outer self to your inner self, creating this correspondence or alignment between the two, because then you get this full flow happening. This inflow can come all the way down and impact your entire existence, even your physical embodiment. And so George talks about that in his sermon, calling that the new church, you know, this alignment of these levels. So, and if we're the ones who actually we have this autonomy, we have this choice in the matter, I find it really important for myself to be like, okay, I want to know how I can open up to that a little bit more, because when you just have your outer self that's not opened up to your inner self, there's just a lot of suffering that goes on, like all the impacts of trauma and negative experiences, everything like that, all of these intense thoughts and feelings that we can be just subsumed by happen in our outer self, and actually there's this enormous resource inside in our inner self, which has a direct connection to the divine, to the presence of the divine. And so, actually, I'm going to grab my, Becky, I'll be right back. My Bible, because Jesus talks about this. This is really where he's talking about sending the Holy Spirit. It says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, because he abides with you, and he will be in you. I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while the world will no longer see me, but you will see me because I live. You also will live. On that day, you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. They who have my commandments and keep them are those who love me. Those who love me will be loved by my Father, and I will love them and reveal myself to them. So I've said these things to you while I am still with you, but the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have said to you. So the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will teach you everything and remind you of all that I have said to you. So we have an inner teacher, and this inner self is this conduit, this pathway for the divine to be with us and help us in the most intimate and scary places, because it's those corners where we feel alone in our own soul, in our own psyche. You gotta have that pathway, or we're just really alone. When you think you're the most alone inside of yourself, there's actually a direct path to this love and wisdom to be present with you and to teach you everything that you need to know. So it's a really exciting and fun exercise to even think of, you look out at the big picture, at the whole story of the New Testament, and you see Jesus. If you think of the characters of the whole New Testament as one system, as an individual system, Jesus is the inner self being with all the parts. And you have all these different parts, the disciples, the sick, the people who need the miracles done to them, and they have this amazing presence that is Jesus, who knows how to be with all of the parts, even if they're having different experiences, like the prodigal son and the son who stayed with Jesus, and he knows how to be with all of them. So we know from Swedenborg that what Jesus's example is what we each get to go through ourselves, and it's alive in us. And this is the picture of it, as Swedenborg tells us. So I want to introduce a little bit more about what IFS says about all of this, because, and I'll just go into my IFS language for a second to sort of say it as plainly as I can, where IFS, as this psychotherapeutic approach that was developed by a guy named Richard Schwartz in the 80s or early 80s or something, where he started using family systems principles to address the different parts inside of a person. And the whole idea of IFS is that what they found, what they call the locus of healing, like how healing happens, is when you get someone's self, which they call S with a self with a capital S, this like inner resource of self energy, when that can connect with parts in the outer self, healing happens. So healing happens when there's a self to part relationship. That's what they've found. So the whole work in doing IFS therapy is you get to know parts, befriend them, build trust with them, so that they're willing to actually take the risk and make some space to even allow self to be present. Because again, the outer self has its own choice and autonomy in all of this. And so it's relationship building between your self and parts in IFS. And IFS acknowledges that it has accepted the fact that it is a spiritual modality, because this aspect of self that they keep finding and meeting in everybody, no matter how traumatized your early childhood was, you have this self that has these qualities that are consistent across people, and those are these transcendent qualities that religions around the world associate with enlightenment. And so they've sort of boiled them down into eight qualities that they have them all start with C, so that it's a little bit easier to remember. And I'm just going to write them in this orange marker here. Compassion.
An orange marker is really hard to see.
Yeah, I couldn't find any other big, thick markers.
Okay.
Compassion, curiosity, and I know my writing's tiny too, but maybe you can come up and take a picture if you want. Compassion, curiosity, calm, clarity, connectedness, I'm going to jump up here, courage, creativity. How many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. What's which one? Confidence. Yay. Thank you. Confidence. So, and I can keep saying them too. So this, as whether an IFS therapist or a practitioner, and really anybody, any of us, when you notice yourself feeling compassionate, curious, clear, like having this really like just clear, grounded clarity, a kind of calmness, a sense of connection with others, this sense of confidence, courage, creativity, those are signs, like the signs and symptoms of self-energy. And this self-energy, even though parts in our outer self can receive, through their relationship with self, they can receive self-energy. So IFS talks about self being active, like that you can relate to your inner self or self as they use physics, like a particle or a wave. So like it is a thing, you can relate to it. You are actually it, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But also it's energy, just like this inflow, right? Like we think of the divine is a person, you can relate to the person who is the divine, but also you receive this life energy from the divine, this love and wisdom. And so that energy can fill the parts in our outer self. And then parts can have a real sense of a relationship with this being who is your core self, your inner self. And so that is a little overview of self and parts. And so if that's critical, like IFS says, this self-to-part relationship is the locus of healing. That's how healing happens, is when parts connect with self. And as I mentioned, parts are burdened. And so what healing is that self knows how to help the parts in such a way that allows them to release their burdens and connect with what's true and what's loving. So what is critical, like does Swedenborg talk about that? Does Swedenborg, talk about this critical connection between the outer self and the inner self? And he absolutely does. And he actually introduces this what can seem very obscure concept, which is the light marker, the middle ground. So if you see here, I've just got this solid line, and that's, the outer self can seem and can be even completely separate from your inner self. But for the two to connect, the more access, the more receptivity that the outer self has to the inner self is because of a middle ground being developed between the two. And so I'm going to spend some time teaching on what Swedenborg says about the middle ground. So, and this is amazing too, because it's so relatable, our outer self. So the inner self, this is Swedenborg in Secrets of Heaven, 5427, can see each and everything that exists and happens in the outer self, but the reverse is not possible unless there is a correspondence and middle ground. To an outer self that lacks correspondence, then the inner self has no reality. In fact, when mention is made of the inner self, it seems so obscure that the outer self doesn't even want to turn its gaze in that direction. Like, what do you mean? Oh yeah, all that darkness in there? No thanks. Either that, or the outer self sees the inner as a non-entity and nothing to believe in. Isn't that great? I mean, it's so relatable. Like, here I am talking up here about your inner self, Tuesday and today, and I would bet that you have parts that are saying, whatever, And Swedenborg anticipated that as well. When the outer self does have correspondence, though, then by means of the middle ground, it sees what's going on in the inner self. The light belonging to the inner self flows through the middle ground into the light of the outer self. Heavenly light, where the inner self lives, flows into earthly light and illuminates it. And the illumination makes the contents of the inner self visible. This yields understanding and wisdom in the outer self, in the outer earthly self. So Swedenborg puts it in plain terms. He says this inner dimension can't connect with the outer dimension or the reverse unless there's a middle ground. Like, this middle ground is critical. So it would be good if we understood whatever this middle ground actually is, right? So, and he says some more like technical things about it. In order for a middle ground to provide a connection, it has to partake of both the inner and the outer dimensions. And how I understand that is there has to be a willingness on both sides. The inner self wants to connect to the outer self. The outer self is like, no thanks, you don't really even exist. Like, see you later. It can't partake. There can't be this middle ground. So there has to be consent on both sides, a willingness. Now, Swedenborg says they are so distinct. So I talked on Tuesday about how, like, we make from these two distinct planes, we make one confused whole, like Swedenborg's sort of calling us out for that. Here he says these two planes, the inner self and the outer self, are so distinct that they can separate. The way our body separates from our spirit when we die. Like, think how distinct it is that your body, we know our body isn't coming with us, at the end of our life. He says your outer self can be separate from your inner self in that same way. And so, also he says, though, that the extent and quality of life the outer level possesses depends on the extent and quality of the connection the middle ground provides. So your whole quality of life in your outer self depends on this middle ground, which is connecting you to inner self. And honestly, I think it's like outer selves that are completely separate from inner selves. Those are the beings who exist in what we call hell. Like, that's when they've completely shut themselves off. So I don't want you to feel concerned. Wait, is my outer self separate from my inner self? Like, if you fed yourself today, like, you're good. Like, that's like you are actually living off of some of these qualities of curiosity and compassion. Like, how many sausages did I want today? Like, that's a compassionate thing. But I wanted to think about, like, what is a physical analogy for this, because it's so important. So how do you have these two things where this depends on this, but there's some sort of choice about it, but there has to be this middle ground for it to live? And the best thing I could come up with is actually think of a woman conceiving and becoming pregnant with a baby. The uterus creates this miracle thing called the endometrium every month. That's what creates menstruation, right? The endometrium is necessary for a fertilized egg to embed in it. And if you have a nice healthy endometrium, you get a fertilization to happen. And then that endometrium grows into this thing that they call the decidua that allows for the baby to create a placenta that it survives on. The amazing thing is the placenta is actually the genetic material of the baby. But the endometrium and the decidua is the mother. So you have this middle ground where you think, okay, the uterus is kind of like the outside, the inside but outside of a woman's body, but it builds this blood-rich tissue that is life-giving, that can support a placenta, that can create a baby. Like, that middle ground, that's a picture of the middle ground. I think that's the best one I could come up with. I'm sure there's other middle grounds in the world, but that's a pretty miraculous one, where you think of this outer thing depends on this inner self. It creates a middle ground. There's some consent. The placenta kind of is coming from the baby, sort of, like genetically, however that works. but then it's completely this flow, right? Like life energy flowing into that baby and helping it live and giving it all of the nutrients it needs, right? Like that, the Holy Spirit, I will give you everything that you need. So that's kind of a physical picture, but back to sort of how this lives in our minds, right? Like, so female bodies can just do that. They do that all the time. But how do we engage this in our own psyches of connecting our outer self to our inner self to signal our consent, you know, to start developing this middle ground? And this is where it's a little bit of a cognitive switch, right? Because Swedenborg is saying, yes, an outer self can think that the inner self has no reality, that it's just a non-entity. But the truth is, it is you. It is yourself, which means, like I said on Monday, everything that flows in from the divine, as soon as it crosses this barrier, it feels like it's you. And that's why I think it's so useful that IFS has given us these 8 C's, because there's things that you feel as yourself. You know, you maybe if you have this belief in the divine, you know that, okay, I'm loving somebody else, and I know that love is flowing into me and through me from the divine, but it's me doing it. You know, there's this I experience. That's the case with all of these qualities, this compassion and curiosity, clarity, calm, connectedness. So what I want you to know is that your agency and autonomy like exists in your inner self. It's maybe like a muscle that you either didn't know you were using or you're not very used to using, but you have it. Anytime that you even consciously choose to open up to like lean in to compassion, to say, what would it feel like if I brought some curiosity to this moment, to whatever's happening inside of me right now? You know, or like, what would it mean for me to lean into my creativity today? That's actually you engaging the you that is your inner self. And so then here's some more things about what Swedenborg says about this whole middle ground. So he makes so our inner dimension is living in heaven's light. He says, our inner self. And heavenly light actually consists of the ability to understand, which emanates from the divine. So everything represented in that light carries perception with it. So your ability to perceive what's going on in your outer self is also a quality of your inner self. We have as much of heaven's light as we have of a loving goodness. So again, that compassion and curiosity of all the 8 C's, those 2 get a lot of, you know, repetition because they're so accessible, I think, and so active. That is this loving goodness, that is heaven's light that's flowing in. So thankfully, you know, I've searched Swedenborg up and down and left and right and all over to be like, tell me what is the middle ground, you know, like give me a little bit more to sink my teeth into here. Because he's like, oh, that's really important, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Like, no, come on, give me a little bit more here, Swedenborg. So he gives this really plain and beautiful definition. He says, the middle ground emerges from the inner core. So that's this critical piece to know. The outer self can't just build it. You know, like the placenta can't be made without the endometrium doing something for it first. It emerges from the inner self, and it emerges when the inner level looks on the outer level with the desire and intent of affiliating with it. Okay?
Say it again.
Yeah, it emerges when the inner level, so you experiencing life as if of yourself, look on the outer level with the desire and intent of affiliating with it. That's like the sweetest language. First, it has this desire, right? That's this compassion. And then it has an intention, you know, a desire and an intention. A desire and intent, but an intent to do what? Affiliate with it. Like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing today? You know, good to see you again. How many sausages did you eat at breakfast? Like, the desire and intent of affiliating with it. Not, I don't know, the desire and intent of wrestling it to the ground until it, you know, acquiesces to your demands. It's the desire and intent of affiliating with the outer self. And we know what goes on in the outer self. Like if you show up to the outer self on a regular day and just say, what's going on? You're going to have an earful. You're going to have a lot of, oh my gosh, like you wouldn't believe, I'm super stressed out about this. I'm really anxious about that. I had a horrible day yesterday, or things were looking good and then it got worse, and I'm freaking out and whatever. That's what the outer self has to say. You know, and this inner core, this middle ground emerges from the inner core when it looks on the outer self. So I love that he even uses such an eyeball-y thing. It looks on the outer level with the desire and intent of affiliating with it. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's how the middle ground grows, and it grows and grows and grows, and then you just get more and more divine love and wisdom flowing down into your outer self. So, I love that simple definition, and it aligns beautifully. So IFS gives you a couple more steps, you know, like you don't need, that's all you need. Like all you need is showing up with some compassion, some curiosity. Your middle ground is growing, you know, to whatever's going on in your outer self. IFS gives you a bit of a pathway that is called the 6 Fs. And this will be useful too. I don't know, I'll try blue this time. So the 6 Fs, they might come in different orders at different times, but find, focus, flesh out, feel toward, befriend, if I spelled friend right, and again, negotiate. This gets into sort of therapeutic stuff, but negotiate fears. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And find.
What's the last one?
Negotiate fears. And so I'll go through them. You've got find. That's look, right? Yes?
Is this the inner, or is this the middle, or is this the outer?
Oh, this is your inner self looking on your outer self and building a middle ground. It's really it's like some steps in, you can do this yourself with your own parts, so your inner self can do this with your outer self parts. If you go to an IFS therapy session, your therapist will be kind of facilitating this. So another word for find, right? Look. That's like what Swedenborg says of like the inner level looks on the outer level with the desire and intent of affiliating with it. So you find, you look, you see what's going on inside. And that could be, I'm having these repetitive thoughts or an emotional state. I'm really anxious or I'm really sad. Or it might be somatic. My stomach really hurts, you know, or my knee won't stop bothering me, or who knows, because I don't have time in this session to get into how parts can use our physical body to communicate with us. You know, they can use it to signal, try to get our attention. So then you focus. So that's like this desire and intent of affiliating with it. Focus pick one thing and just focus on that. And you're using your inner focus. So you're like, what a great question that IFS has is, where are you feeling that in or around your body? Which is amazingly exactly how Swedenborg always described where he felt things in or around his body. He's always saying, oh, the spirits were by my left ear, or they were in my liver, or it was down here. So he was always referencing, where am I feeling this in or around my body? And that was like his orientation to the whole spiritual world. So IFS has found that to be an incredibly useful question as well. So where are you feeling it in or around your body? And if you feel like, oh, I'm just anxious everywhere, what are you kidding me? You know, you can ask, where's the center of it? Like if you had to put a genesis point, like where's the center? And you might be surprised. You'll be like, oh, it's in my head. Or like, oh, no, it's in my upper belly. Like you will know, you will have perception. And that's a capacity you have from your inner self. You can perceive where these things are happening inside of yourself. Then, so once you have a bit, you have somewhere to focus, then you can start to flesh it out, which really just means affiliating with it. You know, this affiliating with it to be like, what's going on here? When I focus, what am I receiving from that direction? And it might be a barrage of thoughts, you know, or it might be a wave of grief, or it might be memories coming up from different times. And then this you could, like, if nothing else, you could hang out with this 1F, you know, just take that one with you, which is how do you feel toward it? Because then, do you have that desire and intent of affiliating with this experience? Or are you finding yourself saying, never mind, I don't want to talk to this anymore, I'm done, you know, don't want to go there. If you're getting that sense, then there's another part that's here with you, also sharing its opinions of what this thing is that you're focusing on. And so you can keep, amazingly, parts are very responsive. You can ask parts to make space. And if the part will let you know, again, you have these perceptive qualities, God-given in your inner self, that can hear what parts are telling you. And either it'll say, yeah, and then you'll feel a little bit of like an energetic shift where you're like, oh, I'm not feeling as annoyed at that part anymore. Okay, how am I feeling toward this part now? Am I feeling a desire and intent of affiliating with it? Am I feeling some compassion and curiosity? And if you are, then great, ask it another question. Befriend the part. Let your curiosity lead you, because that is from your inner self, it's from the divine, of like, what happened? You know, when, why, what are you worried about? Whatever it is. And then the sixth F is negotiate fears, because often, a lot of the time, you're interacting with parts that are very afraid and that are protecting some other vulnerable place in your system. And so this negotiation isn't exact. That sounds a little bit like, all right, I'm going to win this argument, you know. It's more like keep befriending the part, keep listening to its fears, keep even asking, what do you need? You know, what do you need from me? And you'll notice a qualitative shift in your being if a part is feeling like it's being heard and it's getting its needs met. And then that you have just sort of done a full cycle of this self-to-part relationship of creating a part that has a little bit more of a relationship with self. Parts, like Swedenborg says, parts will be like, who are you? You know, who's asking? Like, they don't expect to have any kind of a compassionate resource available to them in your inner system, and they'll tell you. And so then, just like you would, like, the kinds of scenes that can happen in your inner world can be like, if you've ever taken care of a child and they're throwing a tantrum and they go into their room and they slam the door and they don't want to hear from anybody, so you just like sit outside the door and you let the kid know, like, I'm here if you want a hug, or, you know, if you want to talk about whatever's going on. Like, every part, that middle ground partakes of both sides. So every part gets its choice in like, do I want to connect? Do I feel like opening the door right now? And if not, then you're like, all right, maybe another time. Because, like we sang in that song earlier, like timeless time, spaceless space, like the inner self has got all the time in the world. You know, it is interested in your eternal welfare and this desire and intent of affiliating with our outer self for just because it loves it. You know, like love wants to give what it has to another. And so that is the life energy that exists in your inner self. And it's just wants to keep going. So just to close, and then we'll have a little bit of time for some questions. I put the quote from Jeremiah on this chalkboard over here, because so these 6 F's are a nice handy way to get to know, to start to build this middle ground. You've got what Swedenborg says, where the middle ground emerges when the inner self looks on the outer self with the desire and intent of affiliating with it. Just the sweetest, like gentlest language to me. And then we've got the Bible, and this quote from Jeremiah, that I think of this as being what you're doing inside your inner world. So like this, your inner agency is really an enormous, like huge superpower, okay? Like you have this inner agency where you are your inner self, and you can choose how you want to look on your outer self. And when you choose to do that with any of these qualities, you know, lend yourself a little bit of courage, or have a little bit of curiosity, or just this desire of connection. I'll just be with you. Like, oh, you're sad? Let's go sit on the bench, you know, by the river. Being with yourself in a loving way is like the thing that opens you up to all of divine love and all of divine wisdom. Like it's there, and just like Jesus said, like the teacher that Holy Spirit will teach you everything. Like it has everything you need, all of those nutrients. So this quote, I love these verbs: stand, look, ask, walk, find rest. So stand at the crossroads. I feel like the crossroads is like between your inner self and your outer self, right? Like just stand at the crossroads and look. That's the like desire and intent of affiliating with it. Like, look, what's going on in my outer self? Oh, I've got heart palpitations going on, you know, or I'm like sweating, or I feel so tired, or whatever it is. Stand at the crossroads and look. And then ask for the ancient paths. Those ancient paths are so cool to me. I love that language, because I think all those ancient paths are think of all the bajillion ways that the divine has been guiding individuals' inner selves to connect with their outer selves through all time. You know, those ancient paths of like, just even think of the endometrium growing blood vessels, you know, growing into something to find a way to bring this life energy to a new baby. Those ancient paths, like, you might not feel like you know how to do this, but you know how to do this. Like, your inner self has this wisdom, and it's this delightful growing of consciousness, growing of a sense of agency in relationship with your outer self. So those ancient paths are there. And then if you were wondering, yeah, it's where the good way lies. Like that loving goodness, that desire and intent of affiliating with. The good way is like, yeah, how could I bring a little bit of compassion or curiosity to what's going on in my outer self? And then walk in it. Action. Like, do whatever you're inspired to do. Take the risk, you know, try what is the most loving way you can be with yourself in this moment. That's a radical question, and if you live that every day, your life is going to feel different. And then find rest. Find rest for your souls. That's that peace. That is that 7th day of this connection of like wisdom, love and wisdom coming all the way down and helping the parts in your outer self. So, and it's not a one and done. You know, we are on these human journeys. We have parts that are holding things that have been in our family lines for generations. Like, but there is this power and availability in your inner self, and all it takes to shift that trajectory, one little increment, is showing up, looking on your outer self with this desire and intent of affiliating with it. And then you're on your way, and things can start to feel different because you actually are inside of this great mother. You know, you are a part of the great mother who is actually guiding all of this all the time. So thank you so much for your attention, everybody. So we've got a little bit of time for any, questions or reflections, comments. Amy and Dave,
I want to know the Jeremiah what number?
Okay, great. So Amy asked, what's the reference for the stand at the crossroads? It's Jeremiah 6:16. I'll just check. Jeremiah 6:16 from this morning. That was Ezekiel 43, the first 7 verses. 6 or 7, 7 verses. Calvin, and he'll come with the mic. Hang on.
Okay, yeah, this is so cool. So why is the outer self so violently opposed, it seems like, to getting to know the inner self?
Yeah.
What is its problem?
Yeah, these old things called evil and falsity, you know, it's just like we've had a long time to build it up in our systems. There's a great, it's in the book, Opening the Inner World. It's Secrets of Heaven 33:18. That's the one we were talking about in book club yesterday, where he says the outer self, the inner self has a softening effect on the outer self. So the outer self hardens itself against the inner self. And really, it's the natural response to the incredibly hard world that we live in, you know? Like when you don't feel like you have when you're a little kid and your needs aren't being met, what else, you know, can you do? And then those strategies have a sort of expiration date to them. You know, they don't work forever. They can help you survive your childhood, but you have the gift. You know, Swedenborg says regeneration sort of starts in adulthood, and once you have this enough of sort of a connection to love inside, that then this transformation can really get started. Like we do grow into it. I'm wondering, Miriam, do you have a thought on Calvin's thing? Great, go. You can have the mic and go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm Miriam Lexi. I'm also an IFS therapist, so I just want to first say thank you, Chelsea. This is so cool, because as somebody who grew up Swedenborgian, I hadn't necessarily made all of these connections myself, and so it's really cool for me to be like, maybe I was kind of pre-built to be drawn to this, but so yeah, I also had a thought, because I was thinking during the presentation where you were talking about the negotiating fears and sort of how that could sound kind of controlling, but I think so often because of how embattled and hardworking those outer self parts are, they really have not yet perceived that there is that inner self, and it feels scary to learn that that's there, because then that would mean that they're not running the show as much as they think they are. And what I experience so often in therapy with people, that negotiating fear, is that moment where that outer part goes, oh, I actually see you and you're safe. And that's amazing. And I actually feel better. And so there's this melting that happens. And so a lot of that negotiating fears is just finding ways to help them see it. And then that moment when they see it.
I love that. I love that reflection on that. It's so good. And so another thing, right? Why is it so hard? Those parts, a principle of IFS this is why the book is called No Bad Parts, that Dick Schwartz wrote, a little primer on IFS. Every part has a good intention for the system. And so Miriam was saying, you have a part that is doing its job, no matter what the sort of collateral damage is or whatever, because it cares about you. It really is protecting something. It is feeling the need to do that. And yet another question you can bring to parts is how's it going? You know, how are you doing that job? And they're I'm freaking exhausted, you know, I haven't had a day off in 20 years, whatever it is, or 50 years. And so it's but they're so determined that they'll keep doing that job till you're done, till they don't have to do it anymore. And like, so the inner self, that like the negotiation is actually saying, hey, I could help you do the job. I'd be willing to take some of the load. You're like, what? There's somebody else in here who can help me take the load, what do you mean? And so it's this beautiful like adjusting to them having their own mental process of being like, oh, okay, what would I think about that? I'm willing to try it. Maybe I'll try it a little bit. Like, that's where that respect of parts, I think, is so, so important. Is there a question online, Becky? Huh? Yeah, Martha.
Good morning.
Ooh, infinite Martha. There you are.
I wanted to say that I really liked when you said that Jesus was like our inner self and that all the characters in the Bible stories were like our outer parts. That really resonated with me. But as you were going on and on, I was thinking that maybe the parables were that middle ground.
Oh, yes, yes.
That, that's how he communicated his inner part, communicated and understood all the other characters.
Yep, that is amazing. It's so true. And Swedenborg even says that, like, where does he say? How it yields understanding and wisdom is, he talks about how that the nature of the middle ground is visible, clear as day. It is displayed in the form of representations that cannot be described. They are presented in heaven's light, which also contains perception. So that's a really cool thought of like the truth and the love being conveyed in this representational form for the parts to like get it, to start being like, oh, maybe I am loved, maybe I am okay. So I think that's a really cool insight. Thank you so much for that.
Hi, I'm Chris Gleam Frost, and I really enjoyed your talk.
Thanks.
And also, when you were thinking about the analogy of the inner, middle, and outer, I loved what you said about the mother and the baby and the placenta and the endometrium. All that works really well. Mm-hmm. But what worked for me as something even a little more literal, I'm just thinking, I'm the middle child, and I have two sisters. I have an older sister and a younger sister, and I realized as we were growing up when we were younger, my older sister was the classic outer self. She was controlling, she was bossy. I mean, she was the first one out there, so she was out there in the world, and she thought she knew it all. My younger sister, very sweet, very innocent, and very sensitive to people. And I felt as a middle child, I got along really well with my older sister and my younger sister, but the two of them did not get along with each other. They didn't fight actively, but it's just that my older sister was off doing her thing, my little sister was off doing her thing, and they just didn't have a whole lot in common. And I felt like I was the one like negotiating the two of them together. And now we all get along well. The two of them get along great. It just, age and everything. But it just, that's what hit home for me. So
I love that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's such a great systems perspective on like multiple parts. And I do think our parts can, when parts start to get to know self as well for themselves, then they can also be kind of like go-betweens between self and parts of like, hey, it went well for me. You might want to try this too, or whatever. Just different ways that parts can, contribute to developing those deeper relationships. And I love that it just naturally became more. There was more connection over time too.
Yeah,
That's great.
because I think they did want to affiliate, and there was quite a bit of negotiating
going
on, and then it evolved to something really good where we're all pretty cohesive and we all get along now.
Yeah, just that's so great. Relationship building.
Yeah,
That's genuinely
exactly.
what it is. Okay.
So I've been authorized by Trevor to say that we are up to time, so it's 10 of, And because there are so many questions, I want to be sure to announce that at 11 o'clock there will be a discussion group. Please come to it, and whatever questions you have or are going to have, we have a very informal group, lots of conversation on this talk and the talk that's coming up at 10 o'clock in 10 minutes. You're free to move about the cabin. Thank you. Let's thank
Thank you so
Chelsea.
much, everybody.